I had turned it on, but I had not turned it on. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call us to order for the Executive Committee of the Dunn County Board. I will begin with a call of the roll. Let me see. Jim Zons is online. Gary Steen is not here. I think that's it. Oh, Vaughn. Yeah. Actually, was expecting Vaughn. Oh, okay. Well, everyone but Vaughn and Gary with Jim Zon online. Move on to approval of the minutes. If someone would like to make a motion. Supervisor Morehouse, Supervisor Johnson. Any further discussion of the minutes? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Public comments. Do we have anyone from the public? No, I recognize everybody. I think we're good. We didn't get anything online that I know of. Report of the county manager, Chris.
All right, good evening or good afternoon or whatever time of the day that it is. Keepers. Okay, so you have in your packets the proposed county board schedule for, or county board agenda for next Wednesday. Probably the thing of most note on that is that that will be the delayed presentation of the 2021 audit information. Other than that, I'm looking to see if I have a copy. Here we go. Other than that, I don't know that there's anything. There are 3 department reports, Corp Council, the Fair Board and Facilities, the audit report, and then a budget adjustment and some rezone requests.
We're gonna have the solar presentation.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, that is of note as well. Yes, I forget because they're coming in public comment.
Okay.
So yes, representatives of the Elk Creek Solar Project will be present to explain that project, anticipating about 15 or 20 minutes. I believe that's all.
Supervisor Rogers.
Is that better in public comment than an agenda item? I assured Chris that I'd come prepared to talk about that if there was a question. I think there are advantages and disadvantages either way it's set up. You know, some public commenters may feel that they're not being given equal stature. If someone comes in, it is a big deal, but it, you know, in terms of the importance to the people who are presenting and the landowners and the activity and the economic scale of it, but they really are just addressing the board and, you know, letting them know what they're planning on doing and what they'd like to happen. And so I recommended that, you know, it be just considered as part of public comment. However, if the committee here feels that it should be, you know, specifically called out as an item, it could be. I think either way is okay. And I don't think there's a problem with just having it as public comment. There may be different expectations about, I think when they contact me, they said they wanted about 20 minutes, which is, you know, customarily, we don't allow public comment for that long. So, you know, either way you do it, somebody could be in a position to say, I didn't get that opportunity and they did, but.
The one benefit I could see to noting it as public comments with a sub item, you know, including presentation by the solar group is, I know that there are a lot of people in Dunn County who are interested in solar. And so there might be people who were more interested in either showing up to listen to that or tuning in to listen to the recording later. So if it's visible in the agenda, that might be useful for those people.
It does identify it as, you know, a specific topic of discussion. or comment, I guess. It's still not open for discussion. It would be, no matter what, it would be a public comment item.
Yeah.
Information flowing from the speaker to the ears of the county board members. And
I can certainly note it. The agenda won't go out until tomorrow morning, so I can note it as including, I like the language, including a presentation by Elk Creek Solar.
Does that work for everybody?
Mhm.
Okay, sounds good.
Secondly, I just wanted to do a quick update on the opioid settlement. So Dunn County did receive their first payment of just under $40,000. It's still a little bit unclear exactly how many payments we'll receive and what the final dollar amount will be. However, some of the preliminary information indicated that we would be in about that $70,000 to $80,000 range per year. However, there is still some unsettled distribution information. So we received our first payment, and that was deposited similar to ARPA, just deposited into an account so it can sit there until we determine what to do with it. The Human Services Director, Paula Winter, took on the task of coordinating with Sarah Benedict from the CJCC, KT Gallagher from Public Health, and Sheriff Big and Chief Deputy Malta from the Sheriff's Department to just begin to do some planning around that money. What I would note was there was a lot of early question about what would be sort of the reporting requirements to that money. And the bottom line is there aren't any. It's a settlement. So it's essentially a payment to us. And while the idea is that it would be utilized for opioid remediation types of activities, we, in a sense, get to determine how to interpret that information. So once the money is in our hands, it is our task to, ethically to use it for opioid related, but the interpretation of that could be broad. I mean, I don't mean to be unnecessarily
it's not unlimited.
right, exactly. Or to be clandestine about it. It's just that we would have some room within that to be able to be creative in what we wish to do.
The settlement agreement included probably about a 15-page document with letters and numbers outline of all the different kinds of programs and ideas and, of things that it could be used for. And it really is pretty broad.
We've got a little alert in the chat box. I don't know if that's
Oh, I
someone with a question or,
believe that was Jim
okay,
when he couldn't hear.
just wanted to make sure we had that.
No questions about that. Then I just wanted to also give a brief update about economic development. So out of CRT, I volunteered to do some investigation, I guess, for lack of a better word, looking at investigative reporting was what I was going to say. Just in terms of the state of economic development in Dunn County, all of the different organizations, kind of who was doing what other counties around us did with regard to funding to economic development, as well as county involvement in economic development. And so I told the Community Resources and Tourism last night that I had delved into that in the last month and would be ready to have a written report for them in October. But I would say preliminarily, it's all over the page. So it goes everywhere from some small counties in the north that put literally $15,000 into their local EDCs to probably in at least the northern half of the state. Chippewa County is probably the award winner with about $190,000 of county money in their EDC. So just wanted you to know, because that was something that I said that I thought was sort of important to sort out for Dunn County, that I had taken on that project and doing some research around with some recommendations about a direction that Dunn County might wish to go in the future. And that's all that I have.
All right, thank you. On to item 6, reports, resolutions, and ordinances of the county board from the executive committee. Resolution for budget adjustment, sheriff's department, and public health. Chris, do you want to address that, or
I believe that the background information is pretty
this-
self-explanatory to both of those.
just the standard bookkeeping for?
Yep. Receipt of grants or additional allocations.
All righty. Doesn't need to be a roll call here. It will need to be a roll call at
Correct.
the board. So, all in favor? Oh,
You need a,
oh, sorry, I need a motion first. Apparently, I'm more tired than I thought I was. Yes, I would entertain a motion to approve the,
Mr. Chairman, I will move approval of the budget adjustments.
thank you Supervisor Morthos, both for the motion and for the reminder. Supervisor Calabrese, seconds. All right. So with the formalities taken care of, all in favor of the resolution?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Okay, review reports, resolutions, and ordinances coming to the county board from the standing committees. Planning, Resources and Development Committee, rezone. Tom, do you want to address these at all,
We
or?
have 3 zones there. I can go into them, but they're pretty basic. So we had a hearing and did 3 rezone requests were bringing to the board. There were not any real concerns by the committee about these, so I think it's pretty straightforward. Recommendation to be approved.
Any questions for Supervisor Quinn? All right. Committee on Administration, resolution rescinding resolution 2015-60. I'm guessing, Nick, that you're up for this since Vaughn isn't here?
I can speak to it. Sophia's here also.
Whichever of the two of you think is,
I'll give it a try, and if I'm missing something, I'll ask that she come up and clarify. What this does is I'll back up. So every year in August, counties have to settle with other taxing municipalities, taxing entities. Their villages, towns, sewer and water districts, school districts, Chippewa Valley Technical College. So the county has to settle in what for taxes and interest and penalty. Is what we do is we pay them whatever should have been paid to them for taxes, and then so they're made whole, and the county just covers the bill, and then from then on we collect the taxes and keep them and the interest and the penalty. Counties are also authorized to do the same kind of settlement with special assessments and special charges. It does require a resolution. In 2000, well, quite a long time ago, in the 70s, I recall, the county board authorized the county clerk to settle for special assessments and charges in full. And then that was repealed or rescinded a few years later, and we did not do that for a number of years. And then in 2015, there was a resolution passed that authorized the county clerk to settle up to a limit of, I think it was $7,500 per parcel. Even in 7 short years, the list of things that can show up as a special charge or a special assessment on real property as a result of lawn mowing, snow plowing, remediation of, contamination, raising buildings that are dilapidated and abandoned. All of these things have led to kind of an increase in overall of special assessments and special charges that end up on the tax roll. And so even with a limitation of $7,500 per parcel, the county's liability under this authority has begun to creep upward. It's much higher than the payment that we make is much higher than it used to be. And so the treasurer's has requested the Committee on Administration to rescind that 2015 resolution so that special assessments and special charges would no longer be settled in August. The town would, the county would continue to collect and then remit whatever is collected to the towns as it's collected and that would be on a monthly basis. So that's really the gist of it. So instead of giving the towns and other taxing authorities up to $7,500 per parcel, all of the special assessments and special charges that are on the tax bill, we'd stop doing that and then just remit payments that are received to the town or other taxing authority because they own the debt.
Okay, and so presumably, when it goes to monthly, we don't need to issue a new ordinance or anything
No,
we're just authorized under the current statute.
I'm pretty sure. So this year, August has already flown by us. And so this would start up so that, going forward, monthly payment, the treasurer would simply make monthly payments to whatever taxing authority money comes in for.
Okay.
And that's in the statute. It's set up that way. No additional ordinance or resolution work from the county board needed. Did
Anyone
that
have any-
sum it up well, Sophia? Okay.
Awesome. Anyone have any further questions on that? All right. Seeing none, resolution amending the inventory of job classes. Chris, I'm guessing
I would ask the HR Director, Jenna Nutter, to speak to this.
without objection.
Good afternoon. I have been working with Carmen Meyer, the community mentor from the neighbors on putting together or thinking through options to create an in-house CNA training program. This would require a position within the neighbors to be appointed as the instructor for that program. And with that, we evaluated this RN training specialist position, and the grade placement is outlined in the resolution. And with that, we are requesting for the committee to approve adding this to the list of job classifications. And the intention following board approval would be to begin recruiting before the end of the year and continue working on developing the in-house CNA training program. And I would ask Carmen to chime in with anything that I missed.
Carmen Meyer, for anyone who doesn't know me. So I am also, the only added thing to Jenna's report on that is that it is required to have the trainer before we can even apply to have the program. So that's it's the chicken before the egg kind of situation. So we have to have the trainer and the trainer has to be approved before we can even apply for the state to have the program. So that's part of it. And to have the training position, we had to create a position. So we've evaluated a couple of different options of having an in-house training program. So this is just a step to having our own. There's a couple other options we've still kind of mulling over about some other different entities coming in as well, but this would be to have our own position, to then have our own in-house training without a third-party company coming in to do it.
All right, thank you, Jenna. Thank you, Carmen. Does anyone have any questions? Supervisor Kinnear.
Thank you. When the Neighbors Committee looked at this, we looked at this as being proactive to say, okay, if in the future we need this position, we would take a long time to go through it to get it. So the idea from the committee was that we will have this in our back pocket and that we weren't going to recruit for it, which that surprised me a little bit. That we were going to go with a different, less expensive model. And if that didn't work, then we would recruit.
Sure. So just requesting to create the classification so that we could recruit if it's decided to have the position
You haven't.
or the program be in-house. So there's a separate process to initiate the recruitment. The classification would just need to exist before we do that. So I apologize for the confusion. We could certainly discuss further about the timing of the recruitment after the creation.
Okay, the timing or whether we do it at all,
Sure. Yes.
because the committee did not approve recruiting anyone in any way, shape, or form. So it was confusing to me. And
Sure.
so I'm curious, how does, this is a question for Kelly now. So would a recommendation to recruit have to come from the Neighbors Committee? To fill a position, basically, would it have to come from the Neighbors Committee?
I think it could either originate in the committee proper or come from staff. I'm not certain about that. Nick might have an opinion that is more correct than mine, but I know that having that position and being able to train would be a huge boon for recruiting and retention for other positions.
Yes, in our back pocket, there are cheaper ways to do it too. That's what we're looking at.
The
Thank you.
committee certainly is a very likely source of, having this come forward either on its own action or at the suggestion of staff. The one thing for sure is all of the positions, whatever they might be, have to be backed up with budget funds. And the system that we used to have a system, it was kind of cumbersome, where every, point, if a 0.7 LTE moved to a 0.8 LTE, it had to be a county board resolution come up. Every position was identified and county board resolution established them. Now, we don't have that. We have some flexibility, but there must be funding for it in the budget in order to have the position opened. And so I my guess is it's something that, would come for further discussion in order to determine how to do it. My recollection, it's been a while since I looked at the resolution, but my recollection is that it was contemplated that there would be some receipts associated with having it that were hope to be offsetting of the costs. But
If I
For
could,
clarification, Nick.
Yeah.
There's not committee approval required for hiring of the position if the funding exists, based on the ordinance
Yeah.
change.
if the funding
Someone-
exists, so the budget is the biggest, perhaps most general or most broad policy document that the county board adopts. And if there is funding for the position in the budget and it's not going to negatively impact it, it's certainly possible that the position could be filled. I always think of, you could get rid of all the nurses and CNAs and hire private investigators. You have the money for it. Now, you're going to have a problem if you do that. But the money has to be in the budget in order for a position to be filled. You can't just fill it and then say, oh, we need more money. That's not gonna work out well.
Carmen, you had something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I can just explain it a little better. This is more just the first step. We haven't got into the other part of it yet. If we want to do a little bit different of an option where we can hire like a third party company to come in and do CNA training for us in our building or have our own internal in our building. This would be required to do the latter of having our own internal, but we haven't gotten to the point of which one is going to be the better option yet. But if we decide to do the internal one, we wanted to already have this step done in case we wanted to fill it, because that would take potentially 3 months based on when our meeting is, because it comes after county board. So it would take a couple of months at a minimum to get it approved, and we didn't want to wait once we got the other stuff finished. So this is coming beforehand just so that we have it when we want to do that, if we do that. So we're not actively recruiting at this point or planning on doing it once this gets approved. It's more if we need to, we have it there. Just as a clarification.
Thank you, Carmen.
Mhm.
Supervisor Rogers.
So I guess I have a two-part question and comment. First, if this didn't come through the committee, how did it make it before us here?
It did.
This is only to create a classification. So in order for a position to be hired, there has to be a classification to place it in.
So this came through committee on admin?
Yeah.
Rather than through the neighbors, because admin is largely responsible for position description. So it did come through committee, but,
And
oh, Jenna, you wanna,
well, we did discuss it too. It came through the neighbors committee in the form that Carmen just described. You have it in your back pocket in case we need it, because it was so expensive compared to the other one.
Jenna, did you wanna, or did that cover it?
That covered it. Thanks,
Okay.
Mike.
And part two, Mike?
Yeah, I apologize. I wasn't at the committee meeting on administration last month. So I guess that answers my part two.
No, okay.
Yeah,
Thank you, Supervisor
this
Rogers.
just creates a new position in the organizational chart, if you will, that isn't occupied by anyone, but now there's a position there that can be,
Supervisor Rogers,
oops,
So if it creates a position,
or a classification rather.
and then that can be, if there's funding for it, that position can then be filled without any further approval.
I would have to say there's gonna be approval at some level. When you submit your budget, you have in mind the people that you want to have hired and continue working. And the county board will approve that. If you're going to change up what you're doing, there is going to be some committee oversight of that activity. You know, I mean, our rules don't say if you want to hire somebody, you have to ask the committee. But as Supervisor Kinnear has noted, they've considered it, and the committee has at least a consensus on how to handle it. And I would trust that that process is going to take care of how it's handled. Thank you. Sure. I'm not gonna say anything else.
anyone else? Okay. Thank you, Jenna. Thank you, Carmen. Considerations of actions to be taken by the executive committee. We have A, which is the review and recommendation of the draft county budget, and B, which is discussion of the future transfer station property. I'm guessing that the transfer station discussion will be very brief. So if there's no objection, I would like to move that ahead of the budget discussion so that we don't have it waiting. Okay, transfer station. Mike, do you want to introduce this, or do you want me to talk about it first, or?
I guess the facilities committee is reviewing the options with the transfer station. One of the options is to look at selling it or renting it. And it was recommended that be brought to the executive committee before we did any more work on it. The general consensus of I guess that's an opinion. I shouldn't say it's consensus. It's I believe that it's leaning more toward a thought of leasing it than selling it within the committee so that we may still have some control over the use of it if we lease it versus if we sell it, the use of it, that option. Or we'd no longer have control to have that service provided to the county. Whereas if we lease it to somebody that provides that service, but that's the general thinking behind what we look to do moving forward if you guys approve it.
Well, and I will note that the person who recommended that they send it on to exec was me. Because the transfer station discussion has been a fairly loaded one on and off over the years. And I thought that given the political implications that have go along with how we got out of the business of solid waste, it would be worthwhile for this committee to give a recommendation for what to pursue to the facilities committee so that they were not out there all alone without support. My feeling is generally if we are going to do something with it besides just hang on to it, lease makes more sense for the reasons that Supervisor Rogers outlined. And that was the sense I got talking to the committee as well. But I thought that we as a committee might have opinions on it that we would want to express. So Supervisor Johnson.
Is there interest out there for it to be used as a transfer station? And if there is or isn't, say there isn't, would we only lease it to someone for a transfer station?
I believe that someone came forward talking about buying or leasing it specifically as a transfer station, which is how this discussion started.
Mr. Chairman,
Supervisor Morehouse.
prior to the shutting down of our solid waste program, there was a lot of talk about the deficiencies in that structure. The tipping room floor, et cetera, et cetera. Would there be substantial or any renovation involved prior to a lease? Would we be on the hook for fixing it?
Well, one of the discussions that was held at the facilities meeting was if it was going to be leased, it would be leased more or less as is with conditions, assuming that we can make this all work out, conditions for what they would need to do in terms of keeping the facility going. One of the other things that came up and that I will mention here is because of the nature of what the property has been used for, there might be some hazardous waste mitigation. And if we were to sell it, we would have to have that assessed and do the mitigation. And that is entirely likely to cost more than we would get selling it. Same problem we had when we were doing the fender pit.
That's a legal issue that my office has been looking into. I just haven't had a chance to round up the research threads and go through them and distill out of that a recommendation. Now that I'm down to one job, things are looking good.
Well, hopefully I didn't walk myself out onto a
No.
narrow ledge with that, but
No, we're gonna look into it and make sure that, whatever must be done in the event of sale or in the event of lease is documented or listed and known, and then we'll let you know if there are any issues that we need to advise you on.
Supervisor Johnson.
There's also an issue of that 20 acres that is rented out to that farmer. Have you guys talked at all, Mike, about doing something with that? As far as selling or leasing besides farmland, or it was paid a pretty penny for it, and I doubt he's covered the cost of the interest, really.
We have not discussed the farmland.
Okay,
Just the city itself.
okay, thanks.
They will add over the years since the solid waste program ended, there have been expressions of interest. I think probably at least 3 or 4 that I'm aware of people that wanted to, they want to inquire about whether the county would sell it or lease it. Up until recently, the county's directive was for the highway department to utilize it as cold storage in the winter. But I don't know, I don't think that was implemented. And,
Nope.
and that was our prior highway commissioner's discretionary decision making.
I just wanted to put it before everybody and, I mean, if someone has a motion they want to make, that would be great, or if we just want a sense of the committee, that's fine too. Basically, I thought exec committee should at least have a look at it before facilities went. Do we have any strong preference about lease versus sale?
Mr. Chair,
Supervisor
lease,
Keener.
lease for sure.
Okay.
You sell it and it's gone forever. At least for now.
Thanks, okay. So do we want a motion
How
to,
about a motion? Recommending, sorry, never learned. Like I can remember how to talk. A motion that the executive committee from the executive committee to the facilities committee. Recommending that consideration be given to leasing instead of selling the transfer facility.
okay, we have a motion. Do I have a second? Okay, Supervisor Quimmin and Supervisor Rogers. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. You have your remit. Welcome. I'm sorry it took us as long to get here as it did. All right. Now back to 8A, review and recommendation of draft FY 2023 Dunn County budget. Chris, Beata, I think this is the point where
I can take it from here, Chris.
No.
Will you turn on? Thank you very much. He did tell me how to do it, but it just sounded so complicated. And he lost me like 2 seconds into the conversation. So thank you. We've prepared some very informational documents here for you. So what I'm going to show you first is a PowerPoint presentation. That some of you might have seen some of those pieces if you were at the workshop. So it provides a little bit of a landscape of a story about the budget, not just feeding the numbers. The other item I'm going to go with, present to you is position requests. And of course, by department, the actual budget request proposed for 2023. So I will share my screen for the PowerPoint presentation. And the sharing. Okay, so let's start with the objectives of this meeting. So of course, the objective here is to really give this board an overview of the county funding sources that we have and how we actually disperse our funds. We'll touch base on the county levy limits, debt. I'm going to present you some trends, historical trends to going back to 10 years or so. And that is true for the general, the county limits and the debt. The county general fund balance and trends. This is where it's going to show you some historical data, how we are with our debt and so on. Also, we're going to review some of the assumptions we've made, the management made when the budget was put together. And then also review the Dunn County's proposed budget at a summary level. So then that includes that summary overview that I've mentioned and position requests. And the last item here is the executive committee's actions. So I want to start with giving you a picture here of the Dunn County's proposed budget. The revenue sources versus the expense, and what is the difference? And in this case, it's a gap. Our expenses, of course, exceeded the revenue that we have here of 89 million, expenses being at 94 million. So we have a variance of 4.75. So this demonstration will also kind of go down to provide some information that would allow you to make some of the decisions today and how this gap perhaps could be closed. I also want to look, kind of touch base on the levy limit and the debt. So our preliminary levy limit right now, according to Wisconsin Department of Revenue, sits at that 23.5 million. Okay. So I use the word preliminary. Actually, they were available as of yesterday. So that is really an increase to what we had in 2022 by 1 million.
And can I just speak to that for just a second?
Sure.
So that really is based on two things. First, we had a tax increment district close, which, so when they close, then they come back onto the tax roll, and then we get the benefit of any development that's occurred in that district over the previous 20 years. And so that was about $230,000 of additional levy room. And then the other thing that gets taken into consideration in setting our limit is our debt service for the year. So, so basically our levy limit goes up by the amount of debt service that we have anticipated. And so it's a formula that's basically, as Beata said, when she opened the spreadsheet, it pre-filled for her. So basically we were given a number
Right.
based on previous year's numbers.
Wisconsin Department of Revenue. Right. Thank you, Chris. As far as debt, what I'm showing you here is as of our recent audit that was at year ending December 31st of 21. So as of that date, we have $46.9 million.
Which we didn't correct. We don't really, I'm sorry to say, that is an error. Remember when we pulled the double? Sorry,
Yes.
it is
Okay,
not
well,
that number.
we'll-
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we'll come back up. I'll have a more detailed slide for you. But that was, and again, I apologize for that. But, and that also impacts that general obligation debt percentage rate for the overall limit that we have of 191 million. So that leaves us with an unused debt, but of course, once we change that, what is that debt outstanding will then impact the unused debt. And based on SAP, which is our Standard & Poor global rating agency, they rated us at a AA, which is standard. The best you can have is a AAA. So we're doing pretty good. So here also want to touch base on where we are at with our fund balance, and that is two sources right off of our audit report that ended on the December 31st of 2021. So our general fund balance sits at about 17 million, and that was increased by that 4.9 million from 2020. Okay. And we'll also provide a little bit more detail what makes up that number. So where we are at with the percentage of unassigned fund balance, we are at a 60%, but what's recommended is that 25 to 33%. So that indicates that we have a very healthy general fund balance. So here I want to break out to you and says, well, what happened in 2021 that caused this huge increase? So there's a lot of factors that come in there. Human Services was able to return back to the general fund of 1.78 million. And a lot of it had to do with the additional funding that came through for the COVID and some ARPA perhaps. So the neighbors of Dunn County also had a return of 1.37 million. And the other was savings. Other departments outside of Human Services was 1.7 million. So this is kind of like anomaly, because I also want to show you the trends, how we've been doing as far as putting back to the general fund. So here is a 10-year trend of our fund balance and what is our outstanding debt. So this is where our correction is, as of 2020, is actually 38.47 million.
And so you don't think that we're playing fancy math with you? Why it showed one difference, you will hear when you hear the audit report next week. You will hear the auditors say what happened was that the refinancing of the NDC debt occurred in 1 year, but didn't get paid off in time to make the end of the year report. So it essentially shows up twice in our debt limit, but ultimately will be paid the payoff will be paid out now in 2022, and it reduces it to this amount.
So historically, if you look at the transfer in and out, that means transferring into the fund balance and as a negative that was transferred out. That also, when you see a negative, that also means that when the year ended, there was a deficit, and therefore we drew on the fund balance money to cover the deficit. So trending wise, you see it's a little bit over, peaks and valleys, but I want to, focus on, of course, feel free to ask any questions. But my question originally was, well, what happened in 2019 and then 20? Obviously, we kind of explain again what happened in 2021. So in 2019, the reason that we did have transfer into our fund balance of 2.4 million, part of it was DHS also had a transfer into the fund balance, and there were additional savings.
So in
Yeah.
2018, if you were on the board and recall, coming into the fall, the Department of Human Services was anticipating approximately $1 million overage. So there was a budget adjustment in 2018 to move up to $1 million to the Department of Human Services. They ended up spending 760,000 of that. So that's what actually moved when all was said and done. It wasn't $1 million, it was $760,000.
Sorry.
But then in the following
Sorry.
year, in 2019, the Department of Human Services contributed back $1 million. So that it just basically saying 2018 was an anomaly year in spending for the Department of Human Services, and they were able to make that up in the following year and pay it back.
Right. So in 2020, and this is where we transferred out of our fund balance to then pay the NDC outstanding debt. So those are the anomalies. Now you look at 2021 is at 4.8. So this was an opportunity, you know, given the COVID, under the circumstances, we were able to pick up additional funding that we spend the ARPA funds in lieu of what we budgeted either levy. Okay, and other funding sources.
And similarly, you can see that our debt has moved up and down over the years. If we don't borrow money, or as a general rule, we pay off about $2 million worth of debt in any given year. So you can see between 20 and 21, it's about $2 million payment, but kind of trending back to that too. And again, these numbers came directly off of the audit report. So there could be, for instance, in that year 2014, that was the year that we borrowed, probably in 2013, we borrowed for renovation of this building. The first round of the basement and the first floor of the government building. And so depending on, again, the timing to that borrowing and all of those sorts of things, some of those numbers might move around a little bit. But as a general rule, we've stayed in that $30,000 to $40,000 range of debt.
Mr. Chairman,
Supervisor Morehouse.
may I ask a spectacularly stupid question? How, I should probably know this, but I don't. How is the debt limit established?
You know, that's a good.
By
question.
auditors?
Okay.
You mean, is there any rule limiting the amount of?
I just, no, I just, so the debt limit is $191 million. How do we derive that figure?
It is right out of an audit, out of the audit report. So I don't know how
Okay.
that number is arrived at.
I'll ask her.
Excellent question. That's, no, it was a good question. I like it. So, but I also wanted to show you how we are at with the percentage in comparison to the debt limit. And as of 2021, we are at that 19.3%. And I've also kind of dive a little bit more and ask that question, well, what is the recommended rate? So it was anywhere from 0 to 25%. So right now we're below that. I also kind of put a little bit of a definition. This is a reminder too, what is unassigned fund balance? That is really the funds that are available that could possibly be applied to the deficit that we have in our 2023 proposed budget. And also, what is the recommended unassigned fund balance percentage rate? And again, is that 25 to 33? And right now we're at that 61 if we round it. So here where Chris and I spent some time too, and with the department heads, some of them is to, you know, look at some of the scenarios on how we can help close that gap. So we know that we have a deficit of that 4.75 million. So scenario one could be, given the information we provided about where we are standing with our fund balance and our debt. So scenario one could possibly be to fund, to apply fund balance towards salaries and fringes, simply because, you know, something we don't want to borrow for, and issue debt for the remaining balance, which leaves us, and we'll go a little bit more in detail about what makes that deficit. So the idea is to not borrow for any day-to-day operations, but more of the bigger projects and so on. So scenario two, possibly apply fund balance towards, again, salaries and fringe deficit, and apply all the remaining ARPA, because we met about, was it April? No, March on the CIP. So we've kind of identified how we're going to spend the ARPA funds. So during that meeting, the decision was to use ARPA, don't borrow. So when we went through the CIP for 2023, I applied ARPA where it was applicable without any debt. And what's remaining is 1.59 that at that time, we've had it on the 2024 proposed CIP, possibly use that there. Okay, but I wanted to bring it forward to say, it could be a scenario for you to then, would that be something you would consider them to apply that remaining ARPA? And then issue the debt for any remaining balance. Or scenario 2, and again, here 2 is apply fund balance to the wages and apply all the remaining ARPA and then don't take any debt. And we'll kind of see what that looks like. And then scenario 4 is look at all these above scenarios. Any of these 3 scenarios could also require going back and cutting some of items out of our proposed budget. Okay. So here I just, go ahead.
Supervisor Calabrese.
Thank you. Back on that last slide. How can scenario 2 and scenario 3 be possible if number 2 says apply all the remaining ARPA funds and issue debt for the balance, so that it assumes there would be a balance? And then scenario 3 is apply all the remaining ARPA funds and no debt, so.
That means we would have to cut our budget somewhere.
Okay.
Or take from the fund balance.
Okay,
I think 3 is essentially the idea that we would, yes, either cut or move from fund balance, and you'll see those play themselves out as we
Okay.
give you the numbers.
Right.
okay, thank you.
Excellent question.
Supervisor Rogers.
This slide.
Wasn't there ARPA money that we held back to use in the next year's budget? And that would have been the difference
Yeah,
between 2
that's
and
that
3?
that's that 1.59 million, what remained when we did the CIP workshop.
So scenario 2 is not spending the 1.5 million that we've held out for the following year.
Right.
Scenario 3 is applying that 1.59 now and not allowing it to be there for.
No, actually quite the opposite. Scenario 2 says apply it now for 2023, don't carry it to 2024. And then 24 or scenario 4 says, and it is misleading because it would be to apply fund balance and use ARPA in total and don't have any debt. So you can kind of do the rough math in your head. If we have a $4.7 million hole and we decided to take, so that number moves around a little bit, and you'll see that in a minute, and we decided to apply 1.6 million of that from ARPA, then it would leave taking about $3 million out of the general fund, but you wouldn't borrow. This will all make a little bit more sense. There's not really, you either show you the numbers up front or the thought behind it, and then we can refer back to this as we need to, but you'll see this will make a little bit more sense as you see the
Once we
numbers play
kinda
themselves
start-
out.
Right. Excellent question. Really appreciate them. So here too, I want to kind of demonstrate a little bit of a visual too. Using scenario 1 as an example, let's, under the assumption, let's just say, well, if we issued debt of 3 million in 2024 through 2025, but no debt in 2023. So I wanted to see, it's like, well, what does that do to as we're paying down debt? The idea here is, as we work through my budget team, my colleagues, we wanted to somehow work towards flattening that out. Okay, we don't like peaks and valleys, but I wanted to kind of give you a visual, what does that do to our debt? If here's our principal and interest payments that are for our existing debt, what we have right now. And if we were to take out a 3 million, what would that look like trend wise?
And the reason that it says to issue debt in 24 and 25 is simply that if we borrowed $3 million in 23,
Right,
we
we
would not
won't-
have to begin to repay it until 2024.
Right.
Which is when it would show,
Excellent.
begin to show in this graph.
So the next graph, I just kind of look at this, go, what does scenario 2 look like on this trend? Assuming that, here we would apply any ARPA that we have remaining after our capital improvement plan. And then close the gap with a borrowing of 1.5 million and only fund the wages using fund balance. Okay, so I just wanted to see, well, what is that doing to our trend as far as what would our debt look like? The next one is, of course, scenario 3. Under the assumptions, we're not going to do any debt. And what would that do to our trend, principal payment and interest on that debt? When we did the workshop, I think we had them side by side. It would have been too tiny to squeeze them all in one, just to kind of give you a comparison. But I'll be more than happy to share this slide with you after this meeting. So here's where I was trying to consolidate all in one, because I wanted to see, well, if we borrow debt, what does that do to our mill rate, to the taxpayer? So we have these 3 scenarios. If, again, no debt, that's going to come out of in 24 into 25, as we see what happens to the mill rate. So as the debt goes down, we would then expect that mill rate to be impacted as well. And then here's one, what would happen if we did issue a $3 million debt? And the fourth is max our ARPA and fill the gap with borrowing approximately that 1.5 mil. So what was our process in this budget? Of course, we met. We had our workshop in August. Some of you were there. So some of the assumptions that we've made when this budget was prepared, that there was a 3.5% increase to the compensation mid-grid. Compensation, and also in addition to that is compensation grid step increase. So the this was recommended, and don't want to put our HR director on a spot here, but that is the recommended so that we keep up with the demand. Also, based on our health benefits usage, it was then recommended too that there will be no increase to our health insurance. Remains the same. And also we looked at our vacant positions, and at any given time, even though we budget for a position or LTE, FTE, full-time equivalent, if, at that 2% is what we estimated to be vacant at any given time. So that could have a levy impact of $885,000.
Savings. In levy savings.
Because we would have them, but if we don't fill them, we won't have the expense. So the last slide kind of gets us to the executive committee actions. So here the intent of this meeting is to give me the opportunity to present to you the new position requests. And I'll do that shortly. We'll go into detail about the wage and fringe deficit. So you have a better data behind it. What is our operating budget deficit? And then the ARPA, unassigned fund balance, and debt issuance. So this is what we're looking for this executive committee to take action on. So any questions on this PowerPoint presentation before we go into position requests? Okay, so my position requests. Is it going to show? No, I have to new share. Got it. I'm gonna try to blow this up just that bigger, so make it fit on the screen. Okay, so we had few position requests. I also identified, even though they're requests, but they're requesting to change its, to add additional hours to an existing position. And then I labeled anything that's new, well, we would then, it's not really increasing anyone's hours, it's just completely fresh, fresh start. So we had couple requests, very few, but I also provided you some of the comments as to why are we requesting this position? What value is this position going to add? So currently, there is a request to change the hours for the judicial assistant that services the third branch, Third Circuit Court. So what happens, there's currently, this position is filled as part-time and it's at 1,550 hours. So they're asking for additional 530 to make it more of a permanent position at 2080. So what impact does that have on the budget is that 22,429. But that position already has benefits. So by doing this increase doesn't have no impact on existing benefits that this employee has. And by simply adding the additional hours will allow the appropriate support to accommodate the increased workload and also provide necessary assistance to the judge. Second request is also a change to an existing, which is the emergency management and the emergency management department for the emergency management coordinator. So that too is an existing, but it's vacant position, and it's asking to increase from part-time to also be in the part-time by 260 hours. So the impact would be 8,400. Okay, so there's the position as it is now is not eligible for health insurance. And even when we do add the additional 260 hours, the position will still remain not eligible for benefits. So what you see here is just the wage and of course the FICA and taxes and so on. So the third one I have on the list here is highway, which is the field crew. So here, this position will serve as a seasonal staff to backfill some of the duties that are currently being done by a staff that's paid higher wages. So this would be shifting those tasks, and so that would free up those other individuals that are making a lot less to actually do more work where they need to be. So this is because it's a seasonal, it's not eligible for any benefits other than FICA and hourly wage. And we here propose that they start at a step one. Okay, I mean, so this is what we budgeted, but once the positions gets filled, depending on the level of experience, I think management, it can be step 2 or step 3. But right now we budgeted at a step 1. The other one is there's 2 for the sheriff, which is, oh, I'm sorry, I almost skipped medical examiner in my bad. So medical examiner, we also requesting a new full-time chief deputy medical examiner. Because right now, the medical examiner has a lot of part-time deputies. And given the caseload, the hourly wage, it's difficult to fill those positions. So the request is here is to make a full-time position, which will be more attractive and retain that participant. But also there is an opportunity how this position is funded. So this position will be shared with Eau Claire County. And the split is 80-20, meaning that 80-20 would bill to the Eau Claire. And then the 80% and then the 20 would remain us. So I've kind of demonstrated a salary. We've kind of budgeted at a step 3 at that $30.11. What would that look like for the county? We would expect then roughly about $82,000 that will be billed to Eau Claire. So then we have the,
Just a moment, Supervisor Rogers, did you have a question?
yes, the other one is FICA.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I should have put it on there. Okay, no, that's all right. So then we down to the sheriff. So sheriff requested 2 full-time position is for the patrol, the sergeant and deputy sheriff. So the first one, the first request is, to have a full-time position that would be effective January. That number is based on effective January. At that hourly rate to really supervise and oversee some of the investigation division. Because it's a full-time position, then it will also be eligible for health insurance and Wisconsin retirement. So the purpose of this budget, we went and we budgeted single insurance. We went through all our vacant positions and we also looked at the rate of how our existing employees take insurance, what type of insurance. Some of them do, some of them don't. We've kind of estimated about 50% of our employees are at that family benefits. So this one just happened to fall as I was doing my analysis to be at that single. It could be filled by a family. But we have other positions, it's give or take. So then the deputy is also requests, this is also a new position, is at that 2190 hours. So this would too be effective as of January at that hourly rate. So this would be assigned to do some patrol. What's unique about this position is that there is a DNA reimbursed by, was it supposed to be DNR?
Yeah.
I was gonna say DNA, really, what's that? So Errol, my apologies there. Between that 65 and 85. So I took out the lowest rate of 65% out of that 105 to then make the assumption that approximately 68 of that would be funded by the DNR. And then the remaining, let me scroll down. And also this position will be used to reduce some of the overtime that is currently is happening. So this would relieve some of that overtime as well. And because it's a full-time, that too qualifies for benefits. And retirement and FICA and all of that. So this kind of brings us to the treasurer's office is also requesting a change to an existing position. Right now they have an seasonal LTE staff. They wanted to make that change to a permanent part-time individual at 140. So because it's again, staffing and be able to retain training, and there's a lot of cost to that. So this position we budgeted here at proposing at that step 1 out of $17. And because being a part-time out of 1,040 hours does not qualify for benefits, so that there won't be any benefits. So the impact here is that 21 $898. The other request that came through is for the Veteran Service Office. So this is a completely new request. This would be requesting a permanent part-time position as the program assistant to then relieve some of the staff that's there now to do some of that office backfill so that they can focus more on the core functions of their department. And then this position is eligible for health insurance as well.
It's not.
Oh, it's not? Or do I have, this position is not eligible because it falls under the, do I have a total hours?
It's 8 hours a week.
8 hours a week, so another typo. Can't be perfect. But that is the total impact. Any questions on the position requests? The department's heads are here. And if they're not, I'll do my best to answer your questions.
Supervisor Kinnear.
Thank you. Just a general question now, this 241,000. That has not been figured into the budget yet. This would be an addition.
This
No,
is
it's
already,
not.
it's already in that budget.
Okay, so
here.
it's already figured in the 4.7 that we're, okay,
Right,
thank you.
you're welcome. Any other questions?
Supervisor Calabrese.
Thank you. Does the Eau Claire County Board need to approve the medical examiner position as well?
Yes, I provided them a draft, so they know what we're looking at. So they have approximately that number. Yep.
Okay.
So they'll
Thank
be
you.
going in front, I think they already have.
Not sure.
But yeah, there's finance director reached out to me and I provided him the info that he needed.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So if no questions, let's go to the next one. It's best for the last, right? You save the best for last. So I'm gonna do. So this was emailed to you this morning and I apologize for this late dissemination. Wow, this is also very, very tiny. I was trying to squeeze in a lot in one page. Oh, I think I got it. So here we broke it out by department.
Please scroll down, scroll up so
Oh.
that you can get the whole
Oh,
thing,
yeah.
please. Oh, nope, I guess you can't get the whole thing on one.
No, I can, but it will be very tiny.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. So we have, what this document shows is obviously by department. We wanted to identify, point out to you exactly by each department, what is that impact? So when you see a negative number, let's see, go back up. Wow, okay. So revenue needed is what's in the parentheses. Numbers that is not in the parentheses, the departments actually demonstrated savings.
If it's in parentheses, it is part of that levy ask. If
Right.
it's not in parentheses, it means that particular department was able to reduce their costs by that amount or had additional revenue or something that adjusted. That means that they're asking for that much less revenue, that much less levy than they did last year
Right.
or this year. Sorry, this year.
So I've also identified column by separating ARPA of here, the levy as it was last year. Any fund balance applied, why this is here. This is the levy that's required, that's mandatory. Given the programs in IT. I've also broken out here this transfer from other funds. our treasurer's office had a decrease in levy, which then I applied that into the administrative general. So you see that here. This is our other sources other than what I've here identified. And the proposed budget expenditures is a combination of the operating and salaries, wages and all our operating expense. So if I scroll down, this demonstrates a deficit. Oh, this is very sensitive. So we have a deficit of $4.753 million. And what makes up that number? So we broke it out, and based on, if I can direct you here to this left corner, of that 4.7 is 1.635 is wages. So a lot of the departments there that are showing request and levy, if some of you recall from the workshop, majority of it is due to the wage increases. I've also identified is the estimated 2% vacancy rate. So that vacancy rate is not part of that $1.6 million. Okay, so this is at any given time we would have those vacancies, but outside of that, the 2023 budget proposed is that 44.3 million in wages. I also wanted to demonstrate how much of that is requests, and then in comparison to what it was with no change. So that leave.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it's really, really difficult to give you a year-to-year comparison on salary and fringe benefits because it's a constantly moving target across the county. So as positions are added, as positions are removed, as things move around. So the best that it's difficult. So what we did was we took this year's salary and fringe numbers, and we said, if we did nothing different than just sort of our cost to continue with no change, that would be that $43 million. Then we said 392,000 of that are those new position requests. But you see from that other spreadsheet that part of those do have a revenue source, but those are simply in the reflection of the totals. That 392,000 is the cost of those positions. And then the bump in grid and step brings you to the 44.2 million. And then so we took then, if you the difference then is the 1.6.
And for the new request position reason, you see 392, because just assume we take it away. This will also take away the revenue with it, because revenue is part of the number up above.
And then the other thing to note is, so at the transit committee meeting this morning, Austin Witt made them aware that we costed out moving from a contract agency for the drivers and the dispatchers in transit to make them county positions. And essentially, we're showing you the dollar amount, but it is cost neutral because either there were funds in transit or we have a commitment on the part of the Wisconsin Department of Transportation to pay any difference. So they are reflected in the number, but we just wanted to show you that we're not trying to hide the fact that we're advising to switch those positions, but there is no cost to doing that to the county. No additional cost, I should say.
Right. Because if the decision is not to have them on the county payroll, then they would be accounted for as a contract line expense. So if the recommendation is to action is to keep them on our payroll, then we would then take them out of our operating contract expense. So it's just shifting the lines.
And then we lastly show you that 2% vacancy rate, what that dollar amount turns out to be. We did a year by year analysis of what we budgeted for salary and fringe and what we actually expended. And we feel very confident that that 2% is not a dangerous spot for us to be in, to essentially under budget by that dollar amount.
Right.
So
That
then
we-
Beata, if you want to take them over to the right-hand column, the 22.2 million.
That's fun. That's fun.
No, so we're starting from the 4.7.
There is nothing else outside of this.
No, I know.
Oh.
If you want to take them to that, to the explanation for the $2.2 million there on the bottom right-hand corner,
Last column.
right hand, your other
Uh,
right.
I'm sorry, but I don't have anything else other than
No,
what
I-
you
Right there.
No, I'm just saying, I want you to explain the 2.2 million.
scroll down the workbook. I'm like, I don't have anything else. Okay, I'm looking at God. All right, I think I'm on the same page. So this in the middle box, wanted to kind of also identify what was the library's levy requests and also the bridge petition levy request. So this is outside our levy limits. So I just wanted to separate them so we know what they are. So based on the 2023 estimated Wisconsin Department of Revenue County levy limits, this is where we are at, and we demonstrated a number earlier. So then go back to our deficit of 4.7. Out of that 4.7, we've identified as 1.6 being the wages.
And 8.85 being the vacancy rate.
Right. So what that leaves then a gap of 2.231 million that would then need to be closed by that option also could be utilizing max out the ARPA. I've identified some of the ARPA totals here on the bottom that we're planning on for CIP. Perhaps is to push them in towards that number. So those are kind of goes back to that slide, some of the actions that we're looking for this committee to act on.
So just a couple little other explanations. That yellow box in the center there, if you look at the little pink box right above it, it says the grand total is 24 million. That's the actual levy, the total levy ask. But then those two items, libraries
Less.
and bridge petitions, are not counted within your levy limit, so those come off. And so then that's the difference of what we determined yesterday from the Department of Revenue that we're able to levy. Now, obviously, we don't have to levy that amount, but that's the amount that we have available to us to levy. And then the other thing that I would say then is that, again, we're just telling you sort of what your options are in terms of if you take the $4.7 million and you take the 885,000 of the vacancy rate off of that, I believe it leaves, Beata, can you real quick do that math? I wrote it down somewhere, but I don't know that I have it handy.
Yeah, and better yet, I can show the Excel. Right, because we love Excel. Oh. Oops, sorry guys, this is very sensitive. Okay. So assuming that,
No, that's not right. If you take 4.753 million minus the vacancy rate is what I'm
yeah,
looking
I
for.
took out the vacancy rate.
No, you took out too much.
Should be 39 or something.
Yeah,
Mhm.
3.9 and change.
Right, and I just removed the cell reference.
Not the salary one. You want you want to leave the vacancy rate in, take the salary one out.
Oh, okay, so,
I want you to see what sort of the total gap is if we adopt using a 2% vacancy rate.
And Mr. Chairman, the vacancy rate was, is it an average?
It is less than an average, actually. It's a
Okay.
lower rate than what the average would be over the last, I believe, 9 years.
Oh,
So it's a conservative number.
okay, thank you.
So if, I believe, easy decision, if you take the gap and you agree that it makes sense to apply the 2% vacancy rate, it reduces the number from 4.7 million to 3.8 million. And then, again, the options then to consider would be to utilize. So first option, I'm going to go backwards. First option would be to say, county manager and CFO and department heads fined $3.8 million. That would be option one. Not necessarily advising that you say that, but you could say that. Second option would be to say, we would consider funding some of that with fund balance and some of that with borrowing. Third option would be to borrow, or to say some of it with fund balance, some of it with the ARPA that we intended to spend in 2024, and some of it with borrowing. Or the third would be to say, fund the entire thing with the entire difference with fund balance. And so I think it's important just to think back to and we can go back to the PowerPoint presentation and see them, but historically, historically, the county has utilized fund balance every year to balance its budget. How much has varied from anywhere between probably a few $100,000 to over $1 million. So that is been a historical practice that the county has used to balance its budget. What I would also remind you of is that we're kind of hedging our bet a little bit about that with the vacancy rate, but typically what we're starting at is what you're saying is the maximum amount of fund balance that you would use. If expenses come in lesser, revenues come in more, then you're going to use less of that, but it's sort of setting the maximum amount of fund balance that would be used to sort of pay everything up at the end of the year. The other thing that I think is important to note is that as we have discussed both CIP and borrowing in the past, the goal was to try to get us through to 2027. At that point in time, we pay off some other bigger pieces of debt, and you recall from those graphs, that's the point at which under almost any scenario, our
debt keeps dropping.
but yeah, our debt service continues to drop and our debt keeps dropping. So, so these were, I mean, whatever has historically happened to get us to this spot, those are practices that have been utilized in the past. Now, what also to keep in mind is that last year, perhaps because of one of the benefits of, if one even says the benefit of COVID, but was the return of $4.8 million to the general fund. So one potential philosophy would be, rather than borrowing money this year, we're just going to scoop back out $3.8 million of that, essentially leaving $1 million difference.
If you chose to apply some of the ARPA money, some or all of the ARPA money, you could lessen that amount of a pull from the general fund. So I know that the board has had strong sentiments about borrowing money. And so we did not want to come to you saying we think that's the only option. However, I believe that any of the options, when you think about our fund balance and the percentages and how healthy that is, when you think about our borrowing and as opposed to our debt limit, or in conjunction with our debt limit, we are in a healthy situation there, and we do have some ARPA money left. As much as it seems like $4.7 million or $3.8 million, it's certainly nothing to sneeze at. It also, we have options of ways to be able to make this work. The other thing that will happen is after this meeting, depending on the direction that you provided where you'd like us to go next, we do have reworking on the part of all the departments to do, because they will have better revenue numbers. They will have whether certain grants or opportunities will continue into next year. And that will move these numbers around a little bit yet as well. But this felt like this was the safest spot to say, as of today, yes, there might be a few $100,000, maybe even up to a $500,000 swing of a lesser, but this was a spot where we felt comfortable coming to you to say, this is where we believe that things are at us today.
All
So
right.
also, I would like to add a majority of that deficit here, as you see, the elephant in the room be the highway. But I also wanted you to know too, that what makes up majority of that deficit is the projects. So ARPA funds for CIP, we push towards purchasing equipment and support or fund the county roads. As far as the highway account, state projects or other fundings that we apply towards.
And if you would like, I know that Dustin is here. He certainly can review those projects. We tried very hard to not toss Dustin under the transit bus. Because the position of the highway department isn't necessarily Dustin's making. And so the ask on the $3.9 million of additional levy ask on the part of the highway department is really to complete projects that were already in the making before he came on board. But that is a substantial part. If you took that piece out of it, we would be in a whole different financial.
Yeah,
position.
that plus the 2% is about the total number. I couldn't help doing the math, but as former chair of the highway department, I know we need to do a lot of that work. But yeah, it's just one of those instant pop into my head. So we've had a bunch of input. Do you all want to start immediately in the discussion, or would you all like 5 minutes break to get up and move around and process? Okay. Let's come back at 5:20 by that clock. Okay, now that I've got my agenda back.
Before you begin your deliberations, could I just say a couple of things that comments that came up in the break that I think might be helpful. So if you have not been on the executive committee and through this process before, I just want to reiterate that you are not tasked. You can certainly come up with a balanced budget today if you'd like to. But that's not it doesn't have to be your task for today. Really, we're looking for the direction that you would provide about the direction that you would like to go, the work that we would do in the next month, assuming that you believe it could be accomplished for the October meeting, or that you would have a special meeting, which has also happened in the past on occasion, that we would come back to you, I'll just say in October, with implementing your recommendations out of this meeting. So you don't have to sort of decide it all today. What you need to provide us with is direction. And then there's really 4 funding options in total or in combination. You can borrow, you can use general fund balance, you can do cuts, or you can use ARPA, some combination of all of those things. And then the other thing that I wanted to say was just with regard to the position request. First, the Sheriff's Department provided a nice summary in your board packet about the reasons for the request for a deputy and the sergeant. And then the other piece is that department heads are encouraged to ask for what they need. So if they have an identified need for staffing, they're encouraged, this is their time to do that in terms of budget. Because if you go back to our earlier conversation about people sort of needing to live within their existing budget for staffing, if they're going to exceed that, at some point in time, they need to ask for additional monies. So their ask is isn't a reflection on their insubordination to the thought of budgeting. It's they're encouraged to do that, and then the hard work comes in deciding whether or not those are realistic needs that rise above other things in order to be fulfilled.
Thank you, Chris. Looks like we might have another pop up in the chat. If just check and see if we've lost Jim again or someone can't hear. Yeah,
I'm here and I can hear.
Awesome. All right. Does anyone want to leap in to start this discussion? Does anyone have further questions for Beata?
Well, I guess I'll
Supervisor
start.
Morehouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I have complimented both Chris and Beata, our CFO and our county manager for this is really excellent data. This is better data than I have ever looked at as a supervisor in the 7 years that I've been on the board. So thank you for that. It seems to me that since our employees are our most valuable resource, I mean, it is the most important thing. And I think it's the most important task for the county board to support them. I think it is entirely reasonable to support the $1.6 million deficit in salary and fringe out of the general fund. It's a reasonable amount. I think it's an appropriate choice. Secondly, we have the ARPA dollars. I think we should use them as opposed to letting it sit in the bank for another year. And finally, I think our debt situation, our financial status, our Standard & Poor's rating, the advice of our audit would suggest that it is entirely appropriate and reasonable to borrow for the rest. That would be my suggestion. And I think that is scenario 3, 2, 3. I think it's 3. If you maybe wanted to pull those up, that is my position. Yeah, I'm sorry, it's 2.
And if I could just say, we can't take total credit. We've had a team of Beata, Sarah Stabino, I, Dan Dunbar, and Jenna. And I would particularly commend Dan, who's been a brilliant mind to helping us think through this, utilizing, I would believe, some of his past experience at Stout and helping us to shape this. So I just want to call out that they have been, this has been a great team effort.
That's very gracious of you, but it goes to leadership.
Supervisor Johnson.
Are we gonna use the 3.8 or the 4.7 when we're talking about this? What are the, okay.
The
I-
3.8, the 4.7 is assuming that you say 2% variance of vacancy is not a good number. If we take that off of that, then you get to the lower number.
3.8, 3.9.
Yep.
I also think it's a good idea to use the ARPA. And what's left from there, it's 1.59 off in the 3.8. I would like to see a combination of general fund, borrowing and cuts equal. That's just a thought. Some way or another, but
Supervisor Rogers.
So I guess I would encourage us to look at somehow cutting a little bit out of this, at least to make an effort to cut some. And then I would probably concur with what everyone else said. We use the ARPA money and then we borrow a little bit and use a little general fund. I think the general fund is as was said, is because we had a windfall from the COVID and it's not gonna continue and we're gonna be back where we were before. So I hate to think that we have the opportunity to spend a lot of the general fund. So maybe just a little gap filler to get us through would be my 2 cents.
Supervisor Quinn.
Yeah, I'm in general agreement with everybody. I think Diane laid out my position most accurately. I'm not opposed to cuts. And if there are some that the administration thinks could be reasonable, I think we should look at them. But I do think the process we've gone through at every step of the way has pretty much identified a budget that is, where we want it to be. And I'm not really that looking at cuts as an option to speak of. I think using debt, especially if we were to say target the debt towards highway, would be an acceptable option given where we are with our balance and our debt ratios, especially given the charts that we had that showed the capital plan and the debt plan getting to reduced amounts over the next 5 to 7 years. So looking out 7 years, we can use a little debt and it makes sense to do so. So I'm not opposed to that.
Just want to show you this. Did I overjump? I'm sorry. I think that was the scenario where max out ARPA fund balance to support the wages and remaining debt. So that was that 1.5 million.
Well, it wouldn't be that
Slide
much. I don't think.
11, yes. So that's what our debt would look like. And 10, yes. Yes, sorry.
Now, as a question with the way the debt is structured there, is that assuming the 5-year CIP plan, $3 million debt is built into this, if I'm
Right.
recalling correctly?
Right. That's correct.
You are welcome. I was pretty sure that was the way it was structured, but I wanted to double check myself. Oh, Supervisor Kinnear, I'm sorry, I didn't see your light on.
Thank you. Diane explained it really well. I like the 3 parts, but I think we need to have some cuts as a 4th part. A lot of good things going on in the county, and there always have been, and you can't keep adding. So that'd be my take. 4 parts. I think you listed 3 and a 4th part with some cuts.
Can I ask a question?
Please do.
When recommended cuts, do you have areas that you want to focus on?
Not the highway, but the other areas are what I would hope that you would come back with for suggestions.
Nope, I just wanted to get some clear directive.
If
Thank
you have a lot of cuts, it's almost always involving personnel if you want a larger amount of money. But you guys understand the budget way better than I ever will. But yeah, you can come up with them as you see fit.
I think the bigger question that I would have, I appreciate them not being directed at this point in time, because that gives us the maximum flexibility of being able to work with the departments, look at some of those increased revenues where there might be a opportunity for revenue, or decreasing expenses. However, I would look to sort of a dollar amount or a percentage. Maybe perhaps you're not at that point at this point, but as you move forward, do you want, I know it was suggested perhaps a third and a third and a third. It would be helpful to have some direction, because I can probably find $5 really easily.
Put some zeros on it.
Supervisor Calabrese.
Yeah, since this is my first rodeo on this committee and with this aspect of the budget, I was gonna say what Chris just said is that, well, actually not exactly, because you said you appreciate not having specific areas to cut. But I just wonder what the mindset is behind we need to add cuts when without knowing specifically what that means. Is that just a gut feeling? Is it because I look at the numbers in the presentations and I hear the possibilities of and I look at that graph and I think of the amount of debt that we would need to add if we use ARPA and the general fund. I mean, I've seen the presentations of the departments over the years, and I just think if it's possible to not make cuts, I don't see very much. I don't see anything that seems frivolous to me or unnecessary, and I just wonder what the impulse for we got to have cuts is. Is it just a thought about the future? Is it? I just wondering for some clarification on that, so that maybe I could learn a little bit.
In a way, well, the less debt we have, the better. The less we take from the general fund, the better. A few years back, we were at a position where we were afraid to take anything from the general fund. You can look at cuts as not increasing, if you want to look at it, but cuts is a more accurate thing. It works better. If I have a budget at home and I say, well, I'm going to cut out the latte every morning or whatever it is. I don't even know what that is actually, but or am I going to borrow some money to pay for it? So that's from my perspective.
Okay, no, I understand that, and I understand how it works at home. It's just that I've listening to budget deliberations and trying to hear the back and forth at the state level and the federal level over the years. I've heard those comments about that, like, you wouldn't do this at home. But what I've learned on the board is that it's not like home, and like I said, I just don't see some many requests that seem out of the ordinary. So I think I would likely lean towards not cutting, but I'm open if you come back with something that seems like a good idea, then I'll take it under consideration. That's my thoughts.
Yeah,
Tom, and then,
I can wait.
no, you're
Okay, all right, so.
just ahead.
All right, so I think what I really liked about this year was the process where we actually began talking about what the departments needed and got the explanations for why they thought they needed more money, if they needed, or more personnel in particular. I guess mostly it's personnel. Early on in the process, we talked about the debt scenarios very early on in the process. And it doesn't feel like, to me, it feels like in a way we provided a process where the departments really were really encouraged not to. I mean, not to ask for more than they absolutely needed to perform the functions that they did. And so I don't feel that a strong urge to cut for the sake of cutting, because I think we've already made some of those decisions in putting the budget together to this point.
Supervisor Johnson.
I don't feel as if anything is frivolous here on in any department. But I just do not like to borrow money. I don't, and I don't like to see the debt, fund balance being used, but we have to look at realistic things in it. I just feel as if we can find somewhere to say maybe $500,000 cut somewhere somehow. That's my thought. We don't have to make the decision today, right? So.
Supervisor Rogers, did you wanna? Oh, Supervisor Morehouse.
As Supervisor Quinn has suggested, the way the budget was crafted was to tell the department heads, let's stay level. Tom and Mike and I have been on the PR&D committee for 6 or 7 years together. And we know, for example, that the planning and zoning department is down a bunch of staff. They're working beyond, it's amazing that they continue to do the quality of work that they continue to do. And I'm sure that's true in other departments. When we say, because we don't like to borrow, we're going to cut, what we're cutting is people. And we have, the resource that we have in this county is these wonderful employees who work their hearts out for us. I am opposed to cutting because it means that we are cutting personnel. And in some ways, it seems to me that we are denigrating the services that those wonderful staff provide. That's my fairly strongly held opinion.
Supervisor Rogers.
So we are looking to add positions, not cut positions right now in this budget. So when we address that, I do think of the first thing that comes to mind is PR&D, because that's where I get all the calls at home is from the people that know me through that. And they're like, why can't we hire another inspector to inspect sewers and stuff, or those? So now we're looking to add more positions, but we haven't addressed them. Are those positions that we're looking to add more important than the one we're not adding? Are they important enough that we need to add them? So I'm not saying that I know whether or not they're unimportant or important. I'm just saying that I would like to see us scrutinize these, whether we're adding positions or if we're going to add positions. Remember, we're already borrowing $3 million that's already into the budget through borrowing, and now we're talking of borrowing an additional amount of money. So I struggled to borrow the 3 million that we were borrowing prior to this discussion, and now we're looking to borrow more. And that's where I start to have challenges justifying. We're not talking about borrowing 3 million now, we're talking about borrowing 5 million. And that becomes more challenging for me to accept. That's why I think we got to leave everything on the table.
Supervisor Kinnear.
Chris, did you say that you encouraged, like the sheriff, to say, this is where I'd like to be, like for the positions here?
It would stay within their zero. The budget time is the time to ask for positions. Oh, sorry. I don't know. I just saw that. The budget time is the time to ask for positions if you're going to ask for them. So they're not just, they weren't, I don't want to say that they're frivolous, like, and I know that people have graciously said it's not frivolous, but it wasn't like, oh, what's your wish list? But it was, this is the time of the year where if you're going to ask for positions and raise that salary and fringe number, now is the time to do it.
And about $240,000 worth.
Yes.
What would the rest of you think and say, okay, Chris, $500,000 and come back and show us what it would look like? What harm would that do? I mean, you've got that, you have 3 or 4 scenarios then again. The one perhaps that Supervisor Morehouse laid out. And something with some cuts and whatever else you think it'd be.
Can I just, sorry to throw these numbers at you, but let me just kind of take it apart a little bit for you in just a little different way, because it was helpful for me to look at it as well. So if we assume the 2% vacancy rate and take that off the top, we're left with 3,867,000 and some odd change. If we take the, just as it's presented with the new positions, 1.635 million. If, again, I'm not telling you this is what you should do, but if you fund that with fund balance, it leaves you at that 2.2 million mark. And then 100 or 1.59 million of that with ARPA, you're essentially the whole, should you choose to do that way, is $641,000.
Yeah, I was gonna, if I were to just pull numbers out of my head, I was thinking the 1.6, approximately 1.6 for ARPA, about 1.4 out of fund balance to give us 300, leaving that 900,000 borrowing and or maybe $250,000 in cuts. If we have to make some cuts, I would prefer to keep it a smaller number, but I think that would be a reasonable scenario to prepare. One with, say, $250,000 in cuts and one with no cuts, and see how they look? Or do you want 3 and one with $500,000 in cuts? Does that,
And I would just say again, it may be that if, I don't know what the magic number is, but there may be a $250,000 negative swing without any cuts.
Yep.
If you as a committee are comfortable with by October, we would have a better estimation of that. And it doesn't necessarily have to be cuts, but it's basically a reduction of the levy ask by a certain amount. That might happen naturally. I don't know that. I don't know what that dollar amount would be, but so just another consideration to throw on the table.
But yeah, I kind of feel that with the windfall to the general fund of, what is it, 4.5?
4.8.
4.8, 1.4, 1.5 isn't a huge ask. It's not like we're pulling all of that out. It's just a reasonable amount. We could do that almost 3 times. No, almost 4 times. No, 3 and change. So I don't feel that's a huge chunk out of that. And we've got the 1.59 in ARPA. And that really doesn't leave a huge hole, but I think if we can, find that $250,000, $500,000 that we can knock off, that would be great. I lean towards the, borrowing less than $1 million for highway, which is fundamentally how I think we would do it, because highway is structurally the easiest to borrow for. It makes the most sense. And it's the thing that our constituents are going to be, if we're going to borrow extra, that is something that our constituents are going to be more interested in seeing done. Does that, preparing like 2 scenarios like that, does that kind of bridge the difference here?
I just personally don't see anything wrong with looking into it.
Yep.
Why can't we just look at it?
Yeah, that's,
And if I'm wrong, whatever. I just want to look at it.
Mike.
I was wrong, we're not borrowing.
I was gonna say, I was gonna
Yeah.
say.
We had planned on that, but just, I knew as soon as I seen you shaking your head that I was off there, and I just wanted to let you know, I understand that, but the concept of taking money from something to backfill it is still legitimate.
So Nick, I'm gonna call on you to help us out if you can, but because I don't know this and I don't believe Beata's gonna know this, the data publication. Is it how far ahead of time do we have to do publication on the budget, on the final budget amount?
Oh, I don't know the exact numbers, but it's. I think 2 out of the last 3 years or 3 out of the last 4 years. Just the way the calendar is, the timing between the October meeting and the November meeting. Had required the county board to shift the October meeting to a week earlier in order to look at it, finalize it and publish it. And I think is it 15 days or 14 days or 21 days? There has to be a class 1 notice that's published. And the budget has to be static at that time. Not subject to any change. And then there's a public hearing at the November County Board meeting. And so it's sometime in mid to late October.
October 21st to, according to the calendar, the budget calendar. So I have it here for October 21st, notice of public hearing for the fiscal year 2023 budget.
Okay, yeah, the November meeting, if you'll all recall, is very oddly scheduled according to state statute as the first Tuesday after the second Monday or something like that. And our county board rules incorporate that schedule. So we found the October meeting doesn't give us enough time to look at the budget, decide that, let's let the ink dry for a couple weeks on this, and then we'll look at it again at the public hearing. So we've had to shift it. So that's why I know it's mid to late October for the publication of the notice of public hearing. And Beata has confirmed it's the 21st.
So what I was getting at was if you would like us to prepare a couple of scenarios going forward, we might be pushing that to do that at the October exec, and you might want to call a special meeting, like a short special meeting before that to review those scenarios. I'm not sure. This is where you're getting the newbie part of me, but if we have to be publishing on the 21st, we would not have time. We'd have to be ready to go before that in order to get it correct, Andrew? Yep. What, a week out, maybe? A week out before that in order to get it into publication in the proper statutory notice. So that would push us back to basically to the night of, or the day of your, well, maybe even before the October exec. So I'm just thinking that if you want to have some time to think through before you make some final decisions, you might want to consider a special meeting.
Looking at the budget calendar. So September 15th through October 4th, county manager in partnership with the CFO prepares the version of the proposed budget. October 5th, executive committee recommends the final draft of the budget. So that gives us some dates as where we could meet before the October 5th, correct?
You have listed the 21st. That is a Friday. Is that the day that it has to be turned over to the paper for publication?
Yes, that's correct. Needs to be published on that day.
Okay, so the November County Board meeting would fall on the 19th. So it's probably not necessary to adjust that unless you think there's going to be some, detailed and lengthy discussion about what to do. But additional special meeting might be useful, certainly.
If Andrew needs to have publication information to the newspaper by the 14th, by October 14th, I don't know that, I think the county board ultimately isn't going to approve the final budget until November. So that meeting isn't as critical as a final version
of what will be presented in November being done by October 14th
But the county board determines that final.
version
Yeah,
in their October meeting.
yeah. So
Does that mean we need to bump both county board and exec back 1 week?
well, that's been necessary in the past few, I think one out of the
That'd be the
last
5th
4
and 12th.
years. It's been necessary in order to get that timing down. So this year, the November county board meeting is, I think, on the 15th. Unless it's the 8th, I don't know. Yes.
Yeah.
No, that's in
November meeting
November.
is on Tuesday.
Yeah, it's November 15th is the board meeting. October 19th would be the county, typically the county board meeting in
Correct.
October, in October. Um,
The newspaper, so the Dunn County News does not publish on Friday. They only publish legal notices now on Wednesdays. And Beata's date of the 21st suggests to me that's the day we ship it off to the new Dunn County News. So I think they like to have it by 9 o'clock on Friday morning before publication.
Andrew said, it- hearing,
So 15,
takes us to November 1st.
yeah.
So we have to do publication before November 1st. Is that what you're saying, Beata?
Yeah, so yeah, the 26th would be the only since they only publish on Wednesdays. The 2nd would be too late and the 26th would be the day. So 21st has got to be the day it's got to get to the paper.
So the long story short of that is that if it has to go to the paper by the 21st, the October county board meeting would be fine, because that would be final approval before it goes out on the 21st. And then the executive committee a week before that would be okay on the 12th, assuming that you believed that you could come to a conclusion that evening. And I guess you could always have a separate meeting after that if you needed to. I know some years executive has met right before the county board meeting, honestly, to bring the final version into
It's true.
fruition. That was only a long way to say, let's not mess up on the notification, publication parts of it. But I think you're probably okay with, if you'd like a couple of scenarios or more prepared for you for the 12th of October, that would allow time for proper notice and publication before everything else has to happen.
Okay, great. I'm gonna make just one final note on debt, and that's, I'm not a huge fan of debt myself, but I'm a big fan of trying to catch up to some of what we desperately need to do on the highways. And given the amount that highways cost, I don't think we get there without some more debt. So Chris, did you want a resolution from us, or is the sense of the committee enough for you?
I believe that your direction is sufficient at this point in time.
All righty,
you
anyone
concur,
have
Ed?
huge objections to how we work that out?
Nobody is vehemently objecting to the suggestions made to the county manager, so.
And would somebody
Awesome.
be willing to just clarify what it is specifically that you would like to see for your October meeting?
So what I'm hearing is between 1.4 and 1.6 from the general fund, the 1.59 from the ARPA funds, and then the rest as borrowing, with the hope that we can bring that down by, say, $250,000. You know, more would be even better, but you know, if we can target $250,000 does not seem like an unreasonable target. We may not be able to meet it, but. And again, anyone going to vehemently disagree? Okay. That,
That works.
let me pull up my agenda here then. Because I think we're really close to done here.
Reports of the standing committees.
Yep, there we go. That's the last one.
Mr. Chairman, could I make a request? on
Sure.
that? Could Supervisor Calabrese go first in his reporting, because the boys have been really good.
If that suits Supervisor Calabrese.
Thank you. Yeah, that'd be great. Before their eyes bug out of their heads.
Too many devices.
That's right. I appreciate that. Yeah, Judiciary and Law met on the 4th Monday of August, and it was a fairly brief meeting. Josie La Liberté of Child Support has been nominated to serve on the board of the Wisconsin Child Support Enforcement Agency, and we talked about that a little bit and what that would entail. If she gets that position, she's excited about it, and there are some budgetary things like if she gets it, the county would pay for travel, and so that would be factored into her budget. And then, as you saw, the medical examiner detailed a little bit about that position request that she made, and it sounds like they have a really tough job over there, and they're struggling to take care of all that they need. And apparently there's a large increase in unclaimed bodies this year because family members can't pay for expenses and because they can't find family members, and that's a cost that's incurred by the county too. And it was a fairly brief meeting other than that. And the next committee meeting is September 26th at 4:30 of the Judiciary and Law. And the CJCC Operations Committee also met a week ago and talked a lot about family court and the PTAC, which is the Police Treatment and Community Collaborative group, and their goals and action plan. And that was a really informative CJCC meeting. And those are the highlights from Judiciary and Law.
Thank you, Supervisor Calabrese.
Thank you.
You need to scurry off now. Go ahead and do that. Okay, in my mental map of the room, the empty chair there is Supervisor Zons. So Supervisor Zons, if you
I will,
we just lost you for sound. We'll come back to you. I
Got it.
Hey, Jim, you sound like you're underwater and cutting in and out. So I'm gonna come back to you in like 2 minutes. Supervisor Kinnear.
Microphone.
Microphone.
First thing, when you get to be my age or a little older, you're probably in the nursing home to visit friends more often than you used to be. And the care there is just really great. So I got to put that on top. We're still having staffing shortages. The director of nursing is on leave. And I think starting the 1st, we're having an interim director of nursing. The 3rd, October 3rd. So interim director of nursing will be there. And one of the 3 head nurses quit from the buildings, and interviews will be starting tomorrow. So there's some turnover and a lot of stress. What we did in the past is we lowered our census down into the 90s with the hope that we would be able to have enough staff to do it. And as we got some more staff, we eventually built up. But we got up to a point here now where it's pretty stressful again. So right now, we're working to lower the census. We're at about 100 right now. We can have about 135. We're at about 100, and we're going to close the second household. One of the households has been closed, and another one had only 1 or 2 workers in it. So that one's going to be closed as soon as the residents can be moved. So they're working on it, and as you saw from the request for a position, looking at all different ways to try and get and keep people. So it's tough for everybody, all the nursing homes, but I think they're working hard at it. And like I said, the care is still just excellent. The people there are working over and above. So we're hoping we can reduce the stress a little bit when the census goes down. And then if you can keep people and slowly build it up again, and we can build the census up, because if we're at around 111, we've been in the black, which is great. Okay, and we meet a week from tomorrow.
Thank you, Supervisor Kinnear. Supervisor Zons, do you want to make another crack at it?
Let's try another crack at it. I'm
we
hopefully
go.
move to a better location for Wi-Fi at the marina. So the CRT committee met yesterday. We didn't actually have a whole lot of action items or huge amount of discussion about things that we needed to take care of. You heard a little bit from our county manager about some of her initial investigation into what other counties are doing on economic development. There is a new director for extension locally, who's taking over for Jason, who's been the interim director, who's moving on to being an assistant dean. So lots of movement in the extension. And then our next meeting, of course, is next month. And that's all I have from the lake.
Thank you, Supervisor Zons. Supervisor Rogers.
So we did not meet last month, and moving forward, we'll look at the solid waste and the parks in our upcoming meetings, but nothing to report on the last meeting.
Thank you, Supervisor Rogers. Supervisor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Highway Committee last met this morning. Work continues on County Highway Z. County Highway Q Bridge project north of Knapp is finished. Highway crews are spray patching. They are replacing culverts and paving town roads. Completion of the fall mowing operations should be done within the next month. The committee reviewed the project designs for County Highway Z and B. The highway shop / office roof replacement has been completed. We discussed the 2023 budget for a lengthy period this morning. And don't forget about the bus tour, which will be, what's that? Oh, I'm sorry. Which will be a county board and public meeting bus tour. Right, Nick? Close to it?
I'm working on that.
Okay. Anyway, it's scheduled for Wednesday, September 28th from 8 a.m. till 12 p.m. We will be leaving the highway department front parking lot at 8. Hopefully some supervisors can make it. That'd be great. We're not gonna, Dustin assured us we're not going on all rough roads. So we're gonna be on some nicer ones too. And our next meeting is October 12th. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Johnson. Yeah, I did one of those in the back of a car that Molly was driving. I'm very dubious about ever doing another one.
You're the young guy they put in the back, huh?
Yeah. Supervisor Quinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. PR&D committee has met twice in the past month. The last meeting was yesterday, I guess. And normal business, staff has done a really good job of staying on top of all of the requests and duties. The primary, and we have 3, I think, rezone requests that will be coming to the board. Primarily, I guess the main focus of our work for the past little while here has been the review of the hearing for the proposed Lake Tainer Lake District. And we had a hearing, we had a report, have had a report developed by staff, and we've had questions about that report and suggestions for additional information, which the staff is in the process of developing. We're at the point where we are going to review the report at our next meeting and decide whether it's ready to go to the board or not. Most likely we'll go to the board in the October meeting either way. And what we'd like to do is prepare a recommendation from the committee to the board about about whether to approve the establishment of the district and what conditions or stipulations or structural ideas the board may have as for how it should operate and how the county should operate in it. And that would be presented at, as I said, at the October meeting. So that's our job. Thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor Quinn. Supervisor Morehouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Health and Human Services Board last met on August 25th. We did spend some time looking at our legislative agenda. Ms. Winter and I had made some changes to it. I wanted to get it on the board agenda to think about because we have to have a public hearing on the budget at our meeting this month. So we did spend some time talking about it and agreed that the members would take it home and look at it and with some background material and come back next month and make changes so we can pass that off. Veterans Service, we have regular reports from each of our departments. Veterans Services reported their normal report. Also spent some time talking about the new PACT Act, which is setting the phones at Veterans Services to ringing off the hooks. As you know, many more veterans will be eligible for VA, both veterans and their spouses be eligible for VA benefits, which is at least partial justification for a new staff position in the Veterans Service Office so that there's some stability in answering public requests. Public Health reviewed with us the COVID rates and some information about the first monkeypox case in Dunn County. Yes, KT was complimented by the committee about the press release and the media coverage apparently didn't go everywhere. Yes, we've had our first monkeypox case and the person has been, the case is resolved. It's early, but the health department is likely going to be returning some money to the general fund. Human Services included a really nice report from Ms. Winter on her activities and the activities of the department, including a new baby. And she shared some really interesting data with us, which has some, I suspect, applicability to future budgets. About this is in response to a member's question about our aging population and what are the trends in aging. And we get older and older, and will certainly have some implications for county services and so on. So we noted our review of the July vouchers and approved a public health budget adjustment that we looked at today. And our next meeting, and as I said, there is a public hearing on the budget, is the 22nd. That's my report.
Thank you, Supervisor Morehouse. And our next meeting of this committee, after the careful deliberation about making sure we have all of our dates good, will be October 12th. And with that, we are adjourned.